Welcome to Build Strong Habits podcast channel. This is an audio podcast, so take your eyes off the screen, sit back, relax, and listen.
All right, strap in, everyone. We're going deep on Elon Musk today, like really deep.
Deeper than the memes.
Way deeper. Beyond the headlines, past the
Yeah.
tweets, to figure out, I don't know, what makes this guy tick, Is he brilliant? Absolutely. A disruptor, without a doubt. But sometimes, honestly, he just seems like a walking contradiction.
He does tend to elicit strong reactions, love him or hate him, but I think to really understand the guy, you gotta go deeper than, like, the surface level.
Yeah.
So what are we diving into?
Good question. I think to understand Elon Musk today, you got to go all the way back. Back to his childhood. South Africa, pretty rough upbringing by all accounts. He's spoken about being bullied pretty severely. There's been a lot of speculation about maybe him being on the autism spectrum, even though he's never officially been diagnosed.
Yeah, I mean, those early experiences, especially the bullying, you can't help but think that must have had a lasting impact.
Yeah.
Could that have been a factor in, his drive to succeed, to prove himself? That fierce independence he has.
Makes you wonder, right? And then there's this myth that keeps circulating about him being born with a silver spoon in his mouth. Like his family owned an emerald mine, and he was just rolling in cash from day one.
Oh, right, yeah. That's totally a misconception. His dad was involved in the emerald trade, but they weren't wealthy by any stretch. I think Musk's success really comes down to his raw talent for programming. The guy's practically self-taught, and get this, created and sold his first video game at 12 years old.
12. I was barely mastering Super Mario at 12, not coding and selling my own games.
Yeah.
But even at that age, it seems like he was grappling with some pretty heavy stuff. The meaning of life, humanity's purpose, all that.
Yeah, the search for meaning. That's a thread that runs through his whole life. It's almost like the fuel behind his ambition, the thing that shaped his whole entrepreneurial journey. And that journey, it's a wild one. From South Africa to Canada, then to the US, studying economics and physics, landing in California, and launching his first company, Zip2.
Hold on, economics and physics. That's not exactly the typical Silicon Valley tech bro origin story. Do you think that background played a role in his success?
Totally. I mean, it gave him a totally different lens to look through, right?
Yeah.
And for folks who weren't around back then, Zip2, they provided online maps and business directories to newspapers. Imagine, like, the super early days of Google Maps.
So he was already onto something big even then. And wasn't Zip2 eventually acquired? Didn't that give him the cash to launch his next venture, which eventually morphed into PayPal?
Exactly. And PayPal, that wasn't just about the money, though. I mean, that obviously played a part in setting him up for bigger things, but it proved he could create entire new markets, disrupt industries that, people thought were set in stone.
And then come the big ones, SpaceX and Tesla. It was like he went from entrepreneur to, I don't know, almost a visionary, right? Pushing the limits of space travel, revolutionizing transportation with sustainable tech. These were statements.
Huge statements. And let's not forget, both of those companies faced massive hurdles in the early days. SpaceX, for example, had 3 failed rocket launches before they finally nailed it. That takes a crazy amount of resilience, that commitment to pushing through failure, that appetite for risk.
Yeah, playing it safe has never been his style, has it?
Okay.
And I guess those early struggles just make SpaceX's achievements even more impressive, sending astronauts to the International Space Station, launching countless satellites. They even made space tourism a thing.
And think about their reusable rocket technology. Completely changed the game, right? Makes space more accessible, more affordable. Classic Musk. Big vision, pushing the boundaries, that relentless drive for innovation.
And then there's Tesla. I mean, shaking up the entire car industry, going all in on electric when most people thought it was a pipe dream. They didn't just make cool cars. They revolutionized manufacturing, made it super efficient, and then they even open sourced their patents. That's crazy.
That move with the patents blew a lot of people's minds. It was like, hey, we want to speed up the adoption of electric vehicles for the good of the planet, even if it means our competitors benefit. Shows you where his priorities were.
Yeah, it's like bigger than just building a successful company for him. It's about, I don't know, almost like changing the course of history. And don't forget all the other stuff he's got going on. The Boring Company, Neuralink, OpenAI, which gave us ChatGPT, the list goes on and on.
It's almost like he's drawn to these big, hairy, audacious problems. And they seem so diverse, right? But there's a common thread, pushing the limits of human knowledge, what we're capable of. So you've got this guy, right?
Yeah.
Driven, ambitious, achieving the seemingly impossible. And by 2021, he's the richest man on the planet. You'd think he'd be content to, I don't know, chill out on a yacht somewhere.
Right. Enjoy the fruits of his labor. But I guess that's not really his style, is it?
Well, according to his biographer, Walter Isaacson, all that success wasn't actually all that satisfying for Musk. He seems to thrive on challenge, conflict, even a kind of wartime intensity. Being at the top, it was almost too quiet, too predictable.
So true to form, he went looking for a new fight. And he found it in the form of Twitter, of course.
Yeah, that $44 billion Twitter acquisition in 2022, that was a turning point, for sure. Left a lot of people wondering, what's he up to now?
I mean, he said he bought it to protect free speech, fight what he saw as this liberal bias in Silicon Valley, and push back against government censorship.
All very noble-sounding goals. But to be honest, it did seem like a pretty sharp turn from the science-focused innovator we thought we knew. Suddenly, he was in the middle of the social media circus, diving headfirst into these political battles.
He was like, Elon, what are you doing? But then almost right away, he starts making all these changes, right? Mass layoffs, changing the name, pushing that whole hardcore work culture thing. I mean, Twitter employees must have been feeling whiplash.
Oh yeah, he definitely brought that move fast and break things Silicon Valley mentality with him, no question. And it really did make you wonder, was all this about free speech, or was there maybe something else at play?
Well, let's talk about the free speech thing, right?
Mhm.
He reinstated some accounts that had been banned, like Donald Trump's, arguing it was a win for free speech absolutism. But then there was all this other stuff he did that just seemed to totally contradict that whole idea. Suppressing Substack links, deciding that certain terms were now off limits, even banning journalists who criticized him.
Yeah, that was pretty hard to reconcile, right? Like, if he was truly all about free speech, why would he silence voices he disagreed with? It started to feel more about control than anything else.
And that whole thing about Twitter having this inherent liberal bias because it was in San Francisco, well, it turns out a study done before Musk took over actually found that Twitter's algorithms favored right-leaning content.
The data just didn't back up his claims. It's a good reminder that we should always, look at the evidence, not just accept these assumptions at face value, especially with something as complex as algorithmic bias.
Okay, but what about his concerns about government censorship requests on Twitter? That at least seemed like a valid point.
Oh, for sure. Government censorship is a serious issue. But here's where things get interesting. Under Musk, Twitter actually became more compliant with those requests, especially in places like Turkey and India, where they basically caved to demands to censor political dissent.
Hold up, so he was more willing to comply with government censorship than the people running Twitter before him. That doesn't really square with his whole fighting censorship mission.
It is a bit of a head-scratcher, right? And to make it even murkier, under Musk, Twitter stopped publicly disclosing info about those requests. Before, they were pretty transparent, issuing these detailed public reports. That lack of transparency, well, it didn't exactly help build trust.
It's a bit of a mess. And, we haven't even touched on the elephant in the room. Musk's other businesses. I mean, could those have influenced his decisions about what content to allow on Twitter?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? There are definitely some potential conflicts of interest there. Think about Tesla, for example. They do a ton of business in China, which has incredibly strict censorship laws. Did those business considerations factor into his decisions about content moderation on Twitter? It's impossible to say for sure, but it's certainly worth considering.
Man, this is getting complicated. And it does seem like all the drama surrounding Twitter, it might actually be hurting his bigger vision for humanity. I mean, he's alienated some of his biggest supporters, right? People who were totally on board with his SpaceX and Tesla goals.
Yeah, there's a real sense of betrayal among some of his longtime colleagues and employees. And, they were all in on his ambition, those big, audacious goals, and then they get hit with this. It makes you wonder, can someone who has these incredibly ambitious, forward-thinking ideas also be so mired in the day-to-day controversies?
It's tough to reconcile, right? The Musk who inspired a generation with his plans for Mars and revolutionizing transportation, with the Musk who seems completely absorbed in online conflict.
It's a strange shift, and I think it's important to think about the consequences of this path he's taken. Musk's wealth, his influence, it gives him this enormous platform. But with that comes a huge responsibility. Is he wielding that power wisely?
I mean, one of the big concerns is the impact this is all having on the way information spreads online. He says he's all about free speech, but his actions often seem to undermine that very principle.
Right. True free speech, it requires a level playing field. It can't be a situation where the owner of the platform decides who gets amplified and who gets silenced. Musk's control over the algorithms, banning critics, that lack of transparency about government requests, all of that is pretty worrying.
And then there's the whole issue of misinformation and hate speech spreading unchecked on Twitter. Musk's argument is that more speech is always better, but the research is pretty clear. Allowing harmful content to spread unchecked, that has consequences.
Big consequences. Studies show that exposure to misinformation makes people more polarized, it erodes trust in institutions, it can even lead to real-world violence. Platforms have a responsibility to prevent that kind of harm.
So where do we go from here? Is there any hope for a more balanced, responsible approach to online discourse?
Tough question. Musk seems intent on reshaping Twitter in his image, and that vision doesn't always align with the principles of a healthy, democratic public sphere.
It's almost like he's treating Twitter as this giant experiment, but the implications are real. We're all part of this experiment, whether we like it or not.
And the stakes are incredibly high. Twitter has a massive influence on public opinion, political discourse, global events even. The decisions Musk makes, how he wields that power, it has ripple effects way beyond the platform itself.
Honestly, it's a little unsettling. We've seen how these platforms can be weaponized to spread lies, create division, manipulate people.
And with AI advancing at such a rapid pace, the potential for that kind of harm, it's only going to increase. We need to have these open and honest conversations about the ethics of these technologies, the role powerful individuals like Musk play in shaping how they're developed and used.
We can't just sit back and watch this happen. We need to be active participants, demand accountability from those who hold so much power over our information ecosystem.
Absolutely. We have to push for more transparency, stronger ethical guidelines, more effective mechanisms to hold these platforms accountable for the content they host, the algorithms they deploy.
It's a big challenge, but the alternative is just unacceptable. The future of our democracy, maybe even civilization, it depends on our ability to navigate this digital world responsibly and thoughtfully.
Now, circling back to Musk's other ventures for a second, one could argue that this fixation on Twitter has actually distracted him from some of the most pressing challenges we're facing. Climate change, the urgent need for sustainable energy.
It's true. While Tesla continues to make progress on the electric vehicle front, his Twitter escapades have sort of overshadowed those accomplishments, and maybe even slowed progress in other areas.
Feels like a missed opportunity, right? Musk has the potential to be this truly transformative figure in tackling these existential threats, but the obsession with Twitter, all the controversy that comes with it, it might be pulling his attention and resources away from those more crucial endeavors.
Trading long-term impact for short-term notoriety. And the irony is, those Twitter antics might be undermining the very progress he's trying to make elsewhere.
Exactly. The reputational damage, alienating key stakeholders, eroding trust in his leadership that could have lasting consequences.
So what's the verdict? Is Elon Musk a force for good, a danger to the future?
I don't think it's that black and white. He's complex, admirable qualities, some serious flaws, brilliant innovator, but also recklessly impulsive. Capable of grand vision, but also sometimes just plain pettiness.
Like he's battling these inner demons, and the whole world's watching it play out. Almost Shakespearean, right? The incredible triumphs, then the dramatic downfalls.
Yeah.
It's easy to get lost in the chaos, but I think we need to step back and remember, for all his flaws, Musk has accomplished some truly incredible things, pushed the boundaries of technology in ways we never thought possible, captured people's imaginations. I mean, he's inspired a whole generation of entrepreneurs, engineers, you name it.
Oh, absolutely. You can't discount the impact his companies have had. Space exploration, electric vehicles, renewable energy. Those are real, tangible contributions that are making a difference right now. To write him off completely based on his, let's say, recent behavior wouldn't be fair or accurate.
And there's something to be said for the power of his vision, right? He's got this knack for painting a picture of the future that's just so compelling. Humans breaking free from our limitations, embracing these incredible possibilities. It's powerful stuff, even if, the reality doesn't always quite measure up.
He taps into that yearning we all have, I think, for progress, for something bigger than ourselves. He reminds us that we're not just passive passengers on this planet. We can actually shape our destiny.
And that's what drew so many talented people to work with him, to be a part of his mission. They believed in that vision, and they were willing to pour in the hours, deal with the pressure, because they felt like they were part of something truly groundbreaking.
It speaks to his charisma, his ability to inspire people to push themselves beyond their perceived limits, to create that sense of urgency, like you're on the front lines of something historic.
But And there's always a but with Musk, isn't there? There's a darker side to that intensity, a ruthlessness that can be pretty destructive. We've heard the stories, right? Employees pushed to the breaking point, dissent being stifled, ethical boundaries being crossed.
It's a cautionary tale, I think, about what can happen when ambition goes unchecked, about the importance of ethical leadership. When the pursuit of a goal, no matter how noble, comes at the expense of people's well-being, their basic dignity, you have to take a step back.
It's almost like he gets blinded by his own brilliance, convinced he's always right, that the rules don't apply to him. That kind of arrogance, well, it rarely ends well.
It's a reminder, I think, that even the most brilliant minds are still human. They make mistakes. We need to be willing to critically examine those we admire, challenge their assumptions, hold them accountable.
So, how do we judge Elon Musk? Is he a hero, a villain, or something in between?
I don't think any single label can really capture him. He's too full of contradictions, capable of great good and real harm. It's messy, complicated.
Maybe the best way to describe him is as a catalyst. He disrupts, he provokes, forces us to confront these uncomfortable truths about ourselves and the world we're creating.
He shakes things up, challenges our assumptions, reminds us that the future isn't predetermined. We have agency. We can choose the path we want to take.
And that's what makes him so fascinating to explore, right? Elon Musk, he's like this mirror, reflecting back our hopes, our fears, our aspirations. He makes us ask these big questions. What kind of future do we want? What are we willing to sacrifice to get there? Where do we draw the line? What are the ethical limits of progress?
Those are questions we all need to grapple with, not just in relation to Elon Musk, but in our own lives, in the choices we make every day.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I encourage you to keep digging. Explore the many sides of Elon Musk. Come to your own conclusions about his impact, and most importantly, keep those conversations going.
Remember, the future isn't something that just happens to us. We create it. Let's make it a future worthy of humanity.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Build Strong Habits.